Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
I actually thought that I was in a facility where you could make yourself younger by using other people's lives as fuel. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Serious, people on Reddit who have been in a coma, what was it like? Were you conscious at all or were you completely gone? How did you get into the coma and how did you get out?
Number 1.
I was in a really bad car wreck a few months ago and F up my internals and got an awful case of pneumonia, so they put me in a medically induced coma. I remember being awake a few times. The first time was when my sister came to visit. I have really fuzzy memories about what happened, but apparently the only thing I said was, "Am I still prettier than you?" Even with all of my ribs broken and being mostly unconscious, still have A+ quality snark. Another time when I was conscious was when they put a catheter in. F that shit. The only other thing I remember was 4th of July because of the fireworks. When I finally woke up I could swear only 3 days had gone by, but in reality it was 2 months.
Number 2.
I was put into a medically induced coma in 2009, I had swine flu and pneumonia and my lungs were pretty much 3/4 full of blood and other fluids. I was out for almost 2 weeks. I had one dream and it was interesting. I don't remember much of it now, I have it written down somewhere, but the biggest thing I do remember was how time passed in it. Most of the dreams I have, if I'm going somewhere, the time it takes to travel in the dream is insignificant, generally a couple of seconds if that. In this dream, it was like real time. I drove to a house and it literally felt like the drive in my dream took hours. Also, when I walked, I wasn't touching the ground, I was floating. I woke up restrained to the bed because I had yanked the tubes out of my mouth. I was told it took a while for them to revive me and get me back on the ventilator.
Number 3.
I was hit by a car at 13 and dead at the scene, unresponsive, not breathing, and resuscitated when paramedics arrived. Fortunately the hospital was a block from my crash site and then placed me into a medically induced coma once I arrived at the hospital. I had internal bleeding on my brain and a fractured skull and was flown by helicopter to a medical jet that took me from Kennewick, Washington to Harborview in Seattle. The entire trip took less than 45 minutes or so. The only thing I remember pre-coma was laying on a stretcher with a woman who was standing above me that said, "Cops got tanks, I'm going to give you a catheter, do you know what that is?" I mumbled and wasn't coherent whatsoever, sort of like in that state between almost being asleep and actually being asleep, and then she says it's a slim tube I'm going to insert into your penis, and the moment she says penis she shoves a tube, or whatever it was, into my urethra and I passed out. If I remember correctly the medical staff had an idea of when I was going to get out of the coma. Evidently, Harborview in Seattle is one of the top hospitals for neurological work. I was definitely completely gone that entire time, though I remember for a few months afterwards having strange recall of conversations and events that happened in my hospital room, but could never make out what they were. It felt very similar to attempting to recall a hyper-realistic dream but without full information.
Number 4.
Got ran over by a big truck on my motorcycle. Girlfriend was on the back. We were both in a coma. She eventually died. I spent 8 days in a coma. No dreams, no thoughts, no pain, just nothing. It was like a wormhole. 1 minute I was riding my bike, then I woke up briefly in the ER when they shoved a tube into my face, then I woke up 8 days later, disoriented and in a lot of pain. It took me a while to remember what happened. Ended up losing a leg, but I'm lucky to be here, so no complaints. Big shout out to EMTs and doctors and nurses everywhere, you guys are awesome.
Number 5.
I had been sick for a couple of days, though I had the flu. I was at home the day after Thanksgiving and everyone had gone shopping while I stayed home. I suddenly just couldn't catch my breath and could barely stand up. I tried calling family and friends but nobody was answering. I sat on my porch a few minutes and finally thought to myself, well, if there ever was a time to call 911 this is probably it. Paramedics showed up and put me on oxygen while I was riding to the ER and my heart was racing, so they gave me something I don't remember. Whatever it was absolutely kicked my ass and my whole body felt like I was jolting. I don't remember the ride. I remember wheeling into the ER and they told me they were going to put a tube down my throat to help me breathe. Next thing I remember is that I am tied to a bed in a strange room and there is a tube running into a hole in my neck. My dad, who lives 2,000 miles away, is standing over me and starts telling me that it is the middle of January and that I have been really sick but I am getting better. I couldn't talk, was insanely thirsty and freezing cold. It took another few before I could stay awake long enough to start piecing it all together. When I could be propped, I motioned for a pen and paper and discovered that I couldn't really control my limbs. I could hold a pen, but it just would shake like crazy when I tried to write. They had a sheet with the alphabet and basic words, and I could point and try to communicate. Was on the vent for another week while they were sucking massive amounts of brown goo out of my lungs. The sucking out part was excruciating. They'd stick something down the tube and draw it out. Imagine the tickle you get when you need to cough, but it was deep inside my chest and I couldn't cough. To answer your question, I remember having several very vivid dreams. Bizarre situations. Strange colors. In every dream I was unable to move and people were in my dream trying to help me. For example, I dreamt I was inside a huge warehouse full of collapsed shipping containers in downtown LA, and I was trapped in a little cave made of these shipping containers. These two little 8-year-old kids with waist-length magenta hair were telling me in a thick Hindi accent that I was sick and they were just trying to help as they were trying to shove a bright green garden hose up my ass. Other dreams I had were trapped in the middle of the desert or on an ice floe in the ocean, and my brother-in-law was there. Whatever was wrong with me was due to some bullshit prank he was playing on me, but he was taking me to get help. Then for a while I dreamed I was in a houseboat, and a doctor's personal Asian nurse was there with me taking care of me. In the dream I never saw the doctor, but the nurse kept telling me that he was helping me and that I was getting better. On the ceiling was a TV and it was playing the most awesome nature program of all these bizarre anemones and starfish undulating and eating each other. So that's the dreams I had in a coma. As I reran all of them over and over as I was getting better, I realized that the people talking to me were the doctors and nurses, and I mostly had these dreams when they were effing with me. I did have a tube up my ass. I was in a waterbed that would automatically roll me around to prevent bed sores. I was probably freezing from fever often. The kids with magenta hair were the two doctors attending to me. They both have really thick Hindi accents, and most of the time they wore magenta scrubs. The Asian nurse was one of the awesome ICU nurses who would chatter away non-stop whenever she was in the room. So after I was aware of my situation but still immobile and on a ventilator, as I mentioned, I was very thirsty. Mind-numbingly thirsty. Oh, I forgot to mention that I wear contacts, and at some point they had taken them out, of course, so all I could see was vague blurry shapes. I can't see clearly past about 6 inches from my nose. Anyway, I'm so thirsty. But I can't drink. I can't talk. I have a breathing tube in my trachea. When dawn would roll around and everyone working in the ICU was hanging around the counter in the hallway, I could smell coffee and breakfast, but I couldn't really see. I had it in my head that the nurse's counter was a long buffet table covered in fruit, and at the end closest to me was a giant fish tank full of ice-cold dark purple grape juice. I would dream of the condensation rolling down the side of the tank. All I wanted more than anything was for someone to wheel me out there so I could lick the side of the tank. It took my dad about a week, remember, I couldn't talk, to remember to bring me my glasses from home. The look of pleasure on my face when he put them on me and I could see again made him cry. And of course the sight of my little 70-yoke tip-headed hobbit of a dad with tears in his eyes about killed me. Lol. Little bastard flew out the Monday after Thanksgiving and sat next to me for a month and a half, and I never knew he was there. That still disturbs me. I dreamt about nurses and little people doctors and my brother-in-law, of all people. WTF? But never did my dad or my 2 kids enter into my dreams while in a coma. But that didn't disturb me as much as the sudden realization when he put my glasses on that my glorious purple sweaty fish tank full of icy grape juice didn't exist.
Number 6.
My coma lasted roughly a week. I had injured my head pretty badly, and nearly split it open. I remember the ambulance and them telling me it'll be okay. When I woke up, it felt as if I had only blinked, went to get up before realizing I was in a hospital bed. Doctors talked to me until I was coherent. I had almost forgotten how to speak and told me it had been a week. I don't recall anything that happened between the ambulance and waking up. You know those times you lay down to go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning, it feels like you were in bed for maybe 5 minutes but your body seems to know it's been hours. It was kind of like that. I could have sworn I merely blinked, but my body felt fatigued and as if it had barely moved for a while.
Number 7.
I got hit by an underage drunk driver while I was biking home from work in college. It was a hit and run. I got hit pretty hard and broke a lot of bones, even knocked my teeth out when I slammed my face on the handlebars. I was in a coma for 12 days. I woke up in a lot of pain and very confused. Thankfully, they did all the surgeries on my bones while I was out cold. I remember my family all standing around me staring and crying, and then the doctor coming in to check my pupils. The doctor asked, "Do you know what day it is?" And before I could answer I heard my mom say, Ask her a question she'd know even if she hadn't been unconscious with sarcasm. The last thing I remember is the feeling of the air streaming across my face as I flew forward on impact, even though the paramedics said I was awake when they got there. Apparently I kept telling them I was fine and just wanted to go home, but as soon as they got me in the ambulance I was out cold. I didn't hear anything even though my loved ones were talking to me. I woke up thirsty and sore and just so confused. I kept asking, what the hell happened? As I stared at my limbs which were in casts and hanging from contraptions on the bed. I had no concept that any time had passed. Then I relearned to walk and life went on with lots of problems, but as my doctors always say I should have died or at least be paralyzed, so I'm incredibly lucky.
Number 8.
This past July I was in a terrible car wreck. Immediately after arriving at the hospital they put me in an induced coma which I remained in for 1 full week. I was hallucinating a lot thanks to the medicine they were giving me. I didn't realize that I was in a hospital. I actually thought that I was in a facility where you could make yourself younger by using other people's lives as fuel. Obviously using someone's life as fuel means that they die. I was afraid during this entire week and a few days afterwards that they were going to use my family as fuel for someone else's life to make them younger. I was also afraid they were going to use my life as fuel as well. I felt so helpless. Because of the tubes going down my throat I wasn't able to speak, so I couldn't tell anyone in my family what was going on while they were visiting me. A very frightening experience to say the least. Luckily the drugs wore off after a few days and once I was coherent I started to calm down. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.